Without Ernest Hemingway, we would not know who Albert Camus was. And today we are going to hear Albert Camus speak on how Ernest Hemingway inspired The Stranger. And once he is done, we will hear from Sartre on Hemingway's influence on Camus. And then I will explicate and show some of the specific techniques and ideas that Camus took from Hemingway. And this may be a hard pill to swallow, that the Algerian existentialist that we all love to hold near and dear to our heart, the man that red-pilled us into our stranger phase, where we got to be little hedonists, that he was inspired by the rugged American individualist Ernest Hemingway. But today we are going to make that connection because here on Right Conscious, we talk about the best books and authors of all time. I also help authors activate so that we can create a literary renaissance in the present. And one of the first steps of creating that renaissance is showing everyone that the best authors, that every single author behind me followed the same formula. They stole, they synthesized, then they stylized. And then they sent their work most of the time with confidence out into the world. And so this video is one of many examples where I go over connections between authors. And in the playlist down below, you will see my Albert Camus playlist and my Ernest Hemingway playlist, which are growing all the time with new videos. Right Conscious is the headquarters for Hemingway content and Camus content here on YouTube. And so if you are interested, of course, subscribe. And so enough for me. Let's get our first quote out of the way from Camus. But the technique of the American novel seems to me to lead to a dead end. I used it in The Stranger. It is true. But this was because it suited my purpose, which was to describe a man with no apparent awareness of his existence. By generalizing this particular technique, we would end up with a universe of automatons and instincts. It would be a considerable impoverishment. That is why, although I appreciate the real value of the American novel, I would give 100 Hemingways for one Stendhal. So this is an awesome quote, and Camus admitting that he used this American technique to write The Stranger. And let's do a quick aside on the history of this technique, because we know Hemingway most notably for using this style, but he actually stole it from Gertrude Stein, who he was a huge fan of. And this style could be described, and I've heard it described before by Douglas Glover as this, this is paraphrasing, as this self-conscious telegraphing narrative voice that is almost writing for the Flesh Kincaid ease of reading score. You hear people who write like personal development books all the time say you need to write for like a fifth grader. And if you throw like The Old Man and the Sea and some of these, like The Stranger in there, you're going to get something probably that a middle schooler could read. And I just looked it up. The Stranger should be fifth or sixth grade reading level. And Hemingway's The Old Man and the Sea is a fourth grade reading level. But what makes Camus and Hemingway, Gertrude Stein's and Cormac McCarthy's style so notable, and to describe it accurately, is to say that they remove the machine of desire from the novel. They remove most of the interiority, because in a classic novel or a normal novel, a lot of what drives the characterization and the plot is this desire. But in The Sun Also Rises, what is Jake Barnes' desire? In The Stranger, what is Meursault's desire? To go swimming more? To get with Marie more? And there are only a few instances where we actually see him make conscious decisions or think and show that machine of desire. And it's never in this like insane way, except maybe in the most mysterious and dreamlike section of the entire novel, which is the murder scene. Like, why do Meursault and the Arab meet again at the spring? Why did they both go back to the spot of the confrontation? And so this brings up a good point, though, because Camus throughout his life would say, I'm not an existentialist. And The Stranger is kind of championed as one of these existentialist novels. But Douglas Glover, who has a lot of great thoughts on many authors, while discussing this, said that existentialism is a philosophical position achieved by logic. The American style, which is what we're discussing here, is sentimental and self-pitying. It evolved out of disappointed idealism, which is a really interesting thing, because one of the things that happens when reading The Stranger is that I don't know if it's because many of us read this at the start of our reading journey and became connected to it, and maybe it influenced lifestyle decisions. But most first-time readers gloss over what is actually happening in the story. And this is one of the writing tricks that Camus also is taking from Hemingway. When you have this style, it's really easy to just kind of gloss these kind of really gnarly things over. So the plot of the actual story is that there is a pimp named Raymond who is seducing these Arab women into prostitution. And these white men are colonizing Algeria and obviously the land, but in this case, also the women. And so this Raymond guy, who's not very smart, needs help re-luring one of these Arab women in. And so the main character, Merceau, helps him forge a letter to lure her back in. And then when she does, this pimp beats the shit out of her. And then Merceau goes to the police station and lies about the incident so that this man can get off. And the police don't question them because it's two white men against the word of this Arab woman. And so this white man and his friend decide to go to this nice beach bungalow, this beach hangout. And on the way, they see an Arab who is the brother of the woman who just got beat up. So then they get in a fight and the white men beat up the Arabs. And then things get trippy and the logic of the novel turns into an actual story. And then for whatever reason, Merceau goes back and kills him. But Camus, much like Hemingway with many of his characters, conceals, occults a lot of that information because Merceau, when described kind of objectively in those terms with kind of this straightforward plot, is not functioning off of logic unless he is just this like crazy racist, sexist individual. Rather, this seems like the action of someone who is a disappointed idealist, someone who's kind of fallen off track and is heading down this darker road. Someone who's working this job that he doesn't want to work at, someone who doesn't care about his mom. Like, this is kind of like the proto, I hate to say the word incel, I don't know what the right word is, but you guys kind of get it. The disenfranchised individual that's still raging out online. And so this is interesting because Camus says of Hemingway and this style in the novel, because in his other novels, he kind of doesn't do this entirely. Like it's much more of a variation. But it's a dead end. And why is it a dead end? And what's the solution to breaking free of this style? Because I have a video, if you type in right conscious minimalism, I think it's really good. I talk about kind of why minimalism sucks. And something that happens to a lot of writers is that I've personally seen, I think that it's a psychological issue. I think it's a self-esteem issue. I don't know. It's hard to say. Like I said, I talked about it in the other video. And it's a huge topic, but for whatever reason, they decide to get on this bandwagon. And even though I do think that The Stranger is a masterpiece, it was Camus' first novel, published in 1942. He only wrote a couple, and as you guys know, your first novel is like your hardest and obviously like the most rough for most people. And it's kind of a safety net if you do this American technique. And just for a quick aside, the person who blew this technique up was at some level Faulkner, and then in its penultimate version, in my opinion, was Cormac McCarthy. Almost all of his characters had little to no interiority or even machines of desire, and he created absolute masterpieces. And to kind of drive this point home, we now got some quotes from Jean-Paul Sartre on Hemingway's influence on Camus. But when Camus uses Hemingway's technique, he is conscious and deliberate because it seems to him upon reflection the best way to express his philosophical experience of the absurdity of the world. And another quote, "The heroes of Hemingway and Caldwell never explain themselves, do not allow themselves to be dissected. They act only. Some have said they were blind and deaf, that they allowed themselves to be buffeted about by destiny. This is false and unjust. On the contrary, each of their spontaneous reactions is complete, what it would be in real life, something that lives and does not contemplate itself." And another, "When Camus shows us his hero, Merceau, emptying his revolver at an Arab, he takes care not to explain, but he describes the pitiless heat of the day, the merciless horror of the sun. He encircles his hero with a criminal aura. After this, the act is born of itself. It is obvious to us without any analysis." And so those are some great quotes by Sartre. And, you know, Sartre really nails and on the head there, because that scene, the climax when Meursault kills the Arab, if you look at the language with the heat and the sun and how it connects to light in the novel, like light and heat at the start with the funeral, then the darkness and the dimming of the novel as he continues to go from cell to cell into further darkness. Absolutely wonderful hidden stuff by Camus there. And so I love this union. I love when kind of these fits that you wouldn't think would go together absolutely go together. And so what are your guys' thoughts? What did you guys think of the presentation? Do you have anything to add? Any comments on Hemingway, Camus, Sartre, The Stranger, The Sun Also Rises? Let me know. Let me know what I missed. I'm going to be doing many more videos on Camus and his writing. And I just want to thank each and every one of you guys for being here, and I will see you in the next one.